Repercussions of the Self is the third full-length album from FÓRN. This is a atmospheric sludge metal band, a death doom metal band. A little bit of all of those things kind of work their way into their doom metal sound. It is a modern sound, and this is a bit of a different record for their discography. They started out playing a form of sludge metal, sludge doom metal, that was influenced by at least probably like Thou, and I would put it next to like Unearthly Trance in the early 2010s at that time. They had a great sound on their first demo tape, and it continued to amplify on their first EP, their first LP, and it had sort of a darker, extreme sludge sound at a time where bands like Usnia, Bellwitch, and Lycus were touching upon elements of funeral doom, but they were extreme sludge metal bands in general. This band stood out to me at the time in the early 2010s on that first record for having just a little bit of neurosis in there, a little bit of like an atmospheric sludge side to things without going fully post metal, which was becoming more popular around that time. By 2018, they'd reinforced that sound with modern doom metal influences. They had a bit more of their own sound, and there was a pretty strong kind of death doom metal side to that full record and Rites of Despair. I really liked Rites of Despair, and I have to admit, even after it's been so many years, I kind of just wanted the same record. I thought it was strong enough. I was looking forward to it. And I think that we get something a little bit different here. It's not necessarily the funeral death doom take on Pallbearer so much as it is something they're experimenting with on this record. And so we'll get to what that is after this clip and try to reel it in and focus in on what this record is all about. So it's kind of strange. We got an Orancy Pazuzu record, heavily influenced by kind of industrial metal and trip hop, and some of those same references came out when they were talking about this new FÓRN record. And the thing is that what trip hop is a pretty broad range of things, and there's definitely nuance to old and new styles of that music, and certainly is the same to be said of all industrial music. So the way that it plays out here is pretty unique in the sense that they brought in the vocalist and sort of programmer, synth artist, Lane Shi Otayoni, from Elizabeth Colorwheel. And if you're familiar with that band, it's a really interesting fusion of noise rock and many other styles of music that is extreme and just pretty awesome. So finding out that she was part of this record and it plays on basically every song and has a big hand in all of it, I didn't really know what to expect because they're mentioning trip hop and Elizabeth Colorwheel in reference to what is essentially a sludge death doom kind of band with funeral doom elements in there. Well, at the very least, we get big riffs. There are longer pieces that have big doom metal riffs that slowly work themselves out over about 9 to 10 minute songs, and there's roughly three of those on this record. They find interesting ways to build and demolish those phrases, those big riffs, and there are elements of industrial metal here for sure. There's elements of interest in atmospheric metal. Otherwise, it's not quite a post metal record, but there's a touch of atmospheric sludge metal that works its way into a lot of those bigger songs, so they don't feel fully mechanical. They feel like they're working themselves out in an interesting way, and each one sounds very different. Every scene is different on this record, and there's almost a cinematic quality to the way that they work from point to point. That said, some of the least interesting parts of this record come from its pacing, which flit from scene to scene in surprising ways that don't really match up. I think that the idea is certainly very avant-garde in the way that it plays out as a full listen, but that doesn't quite make the flow of the record work. And I would say the middle of the record, where there's a couple of vignettes and shorter ideas that play with industrial music and beats and trip hop and all that, it's all pretty good in the way that it plays out, and there's some really great stuff from Otayoni on there in terms of the way they make that fusion work with heavier guitars and whatnot. But it doesn't quite take us from scene to scene. It just sort of moves from piece to piece without a lot of sense or what I consider meaningful fluidity. That doesn't stop there from being really great songs on here or just substantial larger movement. Regrets Abyss is probably the song that really brings it all together for my taste. It drifts along in a way that is really satisfying, and it was made me want to return to the record initially and come back and see what the rest of it was all about. And I think that that paired with the strong art direction, the interesting collaboration on the cover art, and the production values, which are warm and a little bit post-metallic, but still sound heavy enough to be a sludge metal band, it kind of takes it to that point where if you're going to listen to Sludge in 2024, you'd want it to be about this interesting and unique. Again, the flow was just kind of jarringly not quite there, but the bigger pieces made up for that with immersion. And so the immersion available to this record is why I stuck with it, and I really enjoyed it. It's a surrealistic doom metal record as far as I put it. It's a modern one, and it's a good one. It deserves a high recommendation. Nothing too over the top and mind blowing, but something that is exceptional and fairly original when you dig into the pieces of it and find the personalities of the musicians adding quite a lot to the experience. So, pretty strong record. It still gets a pretty strong recommendation. Not a lot of people are talking about sludge metal these days, so I think this record is worth talking about, as well as the latest Oryx record. Check this one out. It released today on October 18th, and read my review for more thoughts on the whole thing.